Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. This is Mr. Middlepath, and inshallah, you all are doing well. So, this video is on retrospective jealousy. The reason this is important is because during the engagement period, and even during marriage, what happens is people can get suspicious of their partner or suspicious of their significant other, especially when they're talking about the past. Are they saying the truth about their story? How do I know they're saying the truth about their story? How do I know they're not doing more? How do I know they're not lying to me? Right? So it's important to understand that there is two types of gheera which Allah loves and a gheera which Allah hates. The gheera which Allah loves is when there is grounds for suspicion, and the gheera which Allah hates is when there is no grounds for suspicion. So important to take that into consideration. And for those that don't believe me and say, oh no, you don't know what you're talking about, um, for the record, guys, this is statistics on how young people are sending nude photos to each other and what's going on in college and so forth. So if you guys see these titles, don't be alarmed. You should have husn al-dhan that I'm not doing stuff like that and I'm actually looking up research. Anyways, the hadith is here, right? And I'll link it in the description below. And we're going to go to the retrospective jealousy. So it's almost functions like OCD. Imagine in a marriage, for example, a girl is texting someone and she's on her phone, and the guy who has this type of problem will have mental images, mental movies. That's the key feature of this, is the mental movies. He's going to imagine every single possible scenario of who this person could be talking to. Just drink some coffee. And have every single possible scenario of who this person could be talking to, play those movies over and over in his head. It's going to lead to anxiety and feelings of distress and fear and worry. And in the end, he's going to have a compulsion, which is basically checking her, right? And checking her phone and demanding to see it. And then he's going to experience relief, and then the cycle starts all over again. Similar to someone who is washing their hands a lot, right? They touch something and then they're like, oh my God, I touched something. The bacteria is going to infect my hand. My hand's going to melt off. And then they just have to wash their hands and so forth. So it's very similar. It's very similar to OCD in that sense. And this is biological. It's biological because humans, right, from a biological point of view, want to protect their progeny, want to make sure that the children are their children, want to make sure that their spouse is for them and that all the resources are going to them. That's kind of how these biologists try to describe this. So this is not cultural. This is actually biological. And it can happen in multiple situations. It can happen, for example, between two people that are already married. It can activate due to lack of trust. If, for example, one spouse cheats on the other spouse, then this can definitely activate. And it can also activate in the engagement period, in when someone is uh, being told something. So, for example, someone wants to marry a girl and the girl's a convert, and the convert says basically that, or hints that she's basically had previous relationships in the past before she became Muslim. Maybe this guy wants to delve deep and he starts imagining the infinite scenarios of what that could mean and what exactly happened and go through this whole situation. So, this video is on how to handle that. Now, number one, if you're going through this and you're not married, it might be wise to ask yourself, should you get married if you're going through this cycle, right? Should you get married if you're going through this cycle? Because if someone has a questionable past, do you really want to be checking them? And then the second question is, regardless of the person's past, would you be going through this cycle? It's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, it is your right to want to marry someone who you perceive to be as chaste as possible. On the other hand, you could be accusing someone with no evidence of something that they never did and taking things too far. So, how do you know when you're doing that or not? Simple question is to ask yourself, do you have any evidence? And if the answer is no, you need to leave these things alone, right? Do you have evidence? If the answer is yes, then sure enough, you can proceed to leave the relationship, right? Or you can proceed to see if you want to forgive that person or try and ignore their past, because there's nothing to forgive. They didn't do anything wrong to you if you're not married yet, and simply move on. So let's give the convert example, right? Convert example, basically, let's say someone has this activated. If someone hints that they had relationships in the past and this gets triggered, it may be that they simply don't want someone who has an extremely promiscuous past. So he might ask questions that are, quite frankly, very invasive and extremely private, and that he really doesn't have a right to ask. Such as, okay, how many boyfriends have you had in the past? How many times have you had sex in the past? And his compulsion is alleviated, he gets relief, but then the obsession returns again. Oh my god, well, what sexual positions did you do? What kind of sexual uh, behaviors did you have? What were you into? Did you ever do anything like? And then it gets even more crazy when they start getting more and more and more into exactly what was going on, because see, this is mental, it never really goes away. And this is, again, going to the idea of someone saying, having two conflicting thoughts. This person needs to be pure, and this person isn't pure. But I like this person, but I don't want to let them go. So maybe there is a way that they can explain something to me and I can rationalize this feeling away. And there's really no rationalization for this feeling. Someone who is, every time his wife goes on the phone, he's suspicious of her without any evidence, is a crazy person, right? He's acting like a crazy person. So don't act like a crazy person and start interrogating the person you're trying to marry about their past, okay? This shouldn't get that deep, right? When should someone talk about their past? Why should someone talk about their past? I can make a separate video on that. But this is important on the one hand because you don't want to marry someone who's promiscuous and they're lying to you. And I have seen marriages end because the spouse wasn't open about what happened to them in the past, and that bled over into their present. Suspicion is healthy, all right? A certain amount of suspicion, not a lot, but a certain amount of suspicion is healthy. But the point is that there's grounds and that there's evidence for it, right? So something that Allah concealed or something that's private, you don't need to ask about it, right? So, for example, if someone wants to marry someone with a past, right? Or the past even comes up. Is the past part of the present? If it's part of the present, then yeah, you can investigate a little bit. But if it's really way back in the past, then you should leave it be, right? Because there's really nothing that can change by you questioning, and it's only going to disturb your own mental thoughts more. The retrospective jealousy and this jealousy cycle happens with women and men. For women, it happens if they know that their man was in love with someone in the past, and they're gonna be thinking, "Oh, is he? He was in love with her. Was he gonna marry her? Does he still love her? Does he think about her and want to go back to her sometimes?" So it's jealousy over emotional connections. And for men, it triggers if they know that their wife had some type of sexual experience in the past, regardless of whether there was an emotional connection or not. And again, this is biological. It's not based on culture, because biologically, most humans, in terms of their filter and what they're wired to, they want someone for themselves and all for themselves. So that guy's going to want a girl who's never been touched before. The girl's going to want a guy who's never, uh, it's different from person to person. Of course, some people are less susceptible to getting these kinds of thoughts and getting into this type of negative cycle, but it can happen to anyone. And even cultures that are very loose in terms of their sexual norms, people still experience this type of stuff because, again, it's biological. No one wants to be a cuckold, right? In terms of sound fitra, no one wants to be a cuckold. No one wants to raise children that aren't theirs. So people are protective and suspicious of what's theirs. The problem is, though, when you take that biological type of logic and try and implement it on some poor person who has gone through a lot, who is probably very ashamed of their past and gone through their toba, and now you're forcing them to open up all of those wounds again. So let's say, for example, you did something haram in your past, like you went clubbing or you were drinking or you were partying. You don't want your partner to be questioning you on every single little thing you did. You're ashamed of it. You don't want to talk about it, right? Similarly, respect the fact that that person had a past, or they have some private things that they are not proud of that they don't want to share. I bring this up, the how teenage girls are pressured and girls are pressured. So if you're a guy, understand that um, sometimes it's not always the other person's fault. But again, you don't want to make that an excuse and say, oh, okay, I need to now question her to try and come up with a story about how it wasn't her fault. You're never really going to know, right? And that was the part of the virginity and chastity video, which is that true certainty belongs with Allah. This is trying to chase true certainty, and there really isn't any certainty to be had. Rather, this cycle begets more uncertainty. So if what you need to look for are two things in terms of the past. In terms of the past, you want to look for, is the tawbah sincere? Was there in the past a negative pattern of destructive behavior or a lot of promiscuity, in which case that that cycle that you're going through is not necessarily just OCD, it's your fear which is warranted about the suitability of this partner with you. And then number three, you want to make sure that the past isn't bleeding into the present. Are there people, if someone does have a past, are there people still messaging the person? Are there people still involved in the person? All of these are red flags. So what you want to look for is chaste behavior. If you find chaste behavior and you're looking at the chaste behavior and you're making sure that none of the red flags are popping up, these fears of retrospective jealousy, of, oh, are they telling the truth about my past, or all of these things can subside. You can put them to the side and have a relationship that is based on trust. And I'll talk more about, can we talk about the past with the other partner? Should we even ask about the past with another partner? I'll talk more about that in another video. Just understand that if this cycle happens to you, right? If you have grounds for evidence that this person is not a good person, or they haven't done their tawbah correctly, or that the past is still very much in their present, then by all means, it's more than your right to end the relationship. But this cycle can also start and there's no grounds for it. It's just you tripping, basically. So that's another thing that you need to take note of, right? And it is technically haram to question someone about something that Allah has hidden. Hope that all made sense. Take care, everyone. Peace out. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.